Welcome to the Jboy Show, hosted by Jake Crain, the fastest growing sports show in the nation.
I'm Coach Hugh Freeze.
This is Super Bowl champion Brandon Graham.
Hey, this is DJ Shockley, and you're watching.
And thanks for watching the Jboy Show.
All the way from midnight yell practice to playing Colorado, we've got Texas A&M covered like a blanket today with Billy Liucci, David Nuno from TexAgs. And listen, you don't have to be a Texas A&M fan. We're talking a little bit of everything, but if you are, we are getting down and in depth, and you're going to love it. I'm going to get to my monologue in a second talking about the quarterback position, but as usual, college football's almost here, which means betting's almost here. And not just for college football, NFL, Major League Baseball's going on right now, NBA Finals going on right now. You need to go to betonline.ag. If you go there now and you sign up, whether it's desktop or mobile, you get a 50% sign-up bonus. That's right. It's a butter festival over at betonline.ag. That's a 50% sign-up bonus. Parlays, teasers, pleasers, however you get down, game props, whatever. I took Giannis over 50.5 at home the other night, which is like stealing. I should just put the rent on it. I almost felt too good about it going into it, but it's interesting as heck to follow. But go to betonline.ag. Sign up now. Tell them that Jboy sent you. Get that 50% sign-up bonus. Now, my monologue today. I talked a lot about Max Johnson and the Miles Brennan quarterback battle. I made my decision. I think it's Max Johnson. I think it should be Max Johnson. And if you stay in the West and you go a little bit to the West, you find another quarterback battle with a lot of similarities if you really look at it. Outside of experience, the amount of experience that Miles Brennan and Max Johnson have on the field, and that's the quarterback battle at A&M. The biggest question at A&M going into this year. We know defensively they got studs. Leal, O'Neal, Cooper, Jalen Jones, Damani, all those guys. Offensive line, we know they're going to be good. They lost some guys, but they returned some daggum good players. They're going to be a lot better at wide receiver just because they won't have as many injuries. They returned Cup at tight end, Watermeyer, Blake Smith. We're going to get into all that with Billy Liucci and David Nuno, but the quarterback position is so critical. And when I look at the choice that Jimbo has, on one side you have Haynes King, a dual threat guy, one of the fastest guys on the team, has a good arm, is a good enough thrower, at least has shown the ability to be a good enough thrower to keep you honest at this point. You mix that with the running ability, and it creates a big problem for defense. Then on the other hand, you have Zach Calzada, more of a pro-style guy with a big arm, a guy that Jimbo's probably more used to coaching from that style of quarterback than Haynes King. But does that make him more dangerous? And looking at it, looking at the tape a little bit, following the bouncing balls, I think Haynes King is going to be the guy. They're going to fight it out in fall camp. But a lot of this is about Jimbo, and I talked to Billy and David about this, being able to prepare and having two different, not total offensive systems, but basically having the full kitchen open with Haynes King and his running ability as opposed to Zach Calzada. And again, I'm not saying that Calzada is a bad player or he wouldn't have success or A&M wouldn't have success, but it is a totally different animal when you're approaching an offense that has a quarterback that can run. It changes the way you cover. It changes the way you blitz. It changes the way you pass rush. And what do I mean by that? Well, for example, you can't just sit here and stay in man with a guy that can run if he's killing you on the outside because your DB's backs are turned. But you also don't want to play zone every time because then the offense is going to be able to dictate what they do because they know what you're doing. On the other hand, if you blitz a lot and you blitz a guy that can run a lot and you miss, there is not a lot of help behind him. So if he clears that first level, wiggles through that second level, it can be a touchdown. Not a 20-yard touchdown run, a 70-yard touchdown run. But the most deadly thing that a quarterback that can run, in my opinion, brings to an offense, and what scares the defense the most, is play extension. What made Johnny Manziel great? What made Cam Newton great? Even like guys like Joe Burrow, and there's different ways to do it. There's guys that can shuffle around in the pocket. You look at Mac Jones, extending the play from the pocket. Then you have guys like Nick Marshall, like Johnny Vance, like Bryce Young at Alabama. That's the scariest part about Bryce Young and Max Johnson is that the play can break down, but they can make a guy miss out of the pocket, move horizontally, keep their eyes downfield, and it is so hard to cover these wide receivers for 4 to 5 to 6 seconds. A lot of big plays that you will see are not plays that were drawn up. All right, here's the timing. You're going to hit him. It's a 10-step post. Bam. We're going to hit him right there. The safety's going to come down on the dig, on the high-low op. He's going to chase, and we're going to hit the post behind him. That's totally different than saying, okay, well, we're going to hit the bus behind him. Oh, it's not there. Here comes the pass rush. I make the pass rush miss. I extend the play. Now it's a scramble drill, which the offense works on a ton. The defense works on a little bit, but it's always different. And now it turns into jackpot. And that's scary as hell as a defensive guy. Not even counting zone read, not even counting Q power, which is scary as hell, not even counting having to put a spy on a guy, which takes a guy out of coverage, which leaves a hole, especially in zone. It just creates a lot of problems. And the more problems you create for the defense, the more solutions you have for the offense. And I think that's what you're going to see with Jimbo Fisher and the Aggies, at least at this point, heading into the season. Got a great show for you. Make sure you head over to Bet Online. We've got Billy Liucci, David Nuno, new hire from TexAgs. Excited about getting them on and talking a little bit about Media Day as well. Make sure you subscribe. Let's win the water cooler. All right, everybody, let's welcome in two of my favorite guys to not only talk ball with, but talk other things as well. You can find them at TexAgs. I'm going to let them drop the plug. They just hired a good friend of the show, good friend of mine, David Nuno, doing a great job. TexAgs Radio went on there on Monday, had a great time. Looking forward to bringing them on again and getting on there again. And both of you, welcome.
What's up, Jake? How you doing, brother?
Doing good, Billy. David, welcome to you as well.
Thanks, Jake. I'll tell you, I told you this on my show, but I want to say it to your audience. When I was getting ready to take over this gig, I'm coming from the TV world where I cover different schools, even though I'm an Aggie and I watch all the games. I listened to you quite a bit getting ready for this gig, man. So I appreciate what you're doing out there.
Hey, well, I appreciate it, man. I hope you learned a lot of what not to do, maybe a little bit what to do. But no, I appreciate that, brother. And you know what I think about you guys and what y'all have going on over there. And it's a perfect segue into what I want to get into. And look, you know, I've had Billy on here. We've talked about A&M. We've talked about how deep the West is. But, you know, when I look at this, I want to talk about the quarterback situation because we all know that is the most critical position on the field, replacing a guy in Kellen Mond that had a great college career. Billy, I want to start with you. Give me kind of your take on the quarterback battle. Do you think it's leaning a certain way? Do you think it should lean a certain way going into what Texas A&M has personnel-wise this season offensively?
I don't think it is leaning a certain way. I've maintained that kind of my thought process is it'll ultimately be Haynes King in a tight call over Zach Calzada, but that doesn't mean it is or will be. Because Jimbo, I think, has deliberately set this up to where so much of what happens in fall camp is going to play, you know, the biggest role in what happens with this battle. So if Zach Calzada, who went from here to here, from the end of last season through spring ball, I mean, he looked like a different guy, in my opinion, from what I saw watching. Yeah, if he continues to do that, and if Haynes King struggled, just happened to come out and not be sharp for the first couple of weeks of fall camp, then there's been no decision made. And if your team sees that, then you've got to go with Calzada, who, by the way, like I've said before, has an NFL. He has a Sunday arm, no question about it. But I think Haynes King, I've said it before, I think he has all the intangibles in terms of whether it's knowledge of the offense, that unwavering confidence, that belief from his teammates, but also that ability he made some really nice throws in spring ball. Yeah. But here's the one thing in the wild card and why I think it'll ultimately be him is that running ability, David. And we've seen it. We saw what Jimbo was able to do with Kellen. We saw what A&M was able to do with the mobile QB and Johnny. They had one that they let get away in Kyler Murray. They had one in Trevor Knight and had probably their best season out of the first and most recent. You had the first season in the SEC. You had the most recent season. That Trevor Knight-led team was probably their third best in the SEC. Had he not gotten hurt, they could have been 10-2 New Year's Six bowl. They were number 4 in the playoff. So Haynes is legitimately in the conversation for the fastest guy on the team, and he's not a short kind of explosive. He's a tall, long guy that runs a 4.45. You don't see that a lot. And I don't think he gets to really show what he can do in practice near as much. And so I do think that intrigue of, man, we get this guy in the game. What can we do with him?
And I'll throw in the fact that I don't think you have to make a decision right away anyway with the way the schedule lines up. Kent State, Colorado, New Mexico. I mean, if you want to experiment a little bit early on, you certainly can. But I agree with Billy that Haynes, to me, has that it factor. Not saying that Zach doesn't, but just for what they're trying to do this year, I see it leaning towards Haynes.
Yeah, and we all know people like to experiment in college, David. So I don't think you're too far off there. But no, David, I want to stick with you because it's a great point. And Billy, I always think of things from a defensive standpoint, having to account for a quarterback that can run. And I agree with you 100%. It's really my argument for why Max Johnson should be the starting quarterback at LSU, as well as Jake Peets and DJ Mangus bringing in an RPO zone read type offense. But David, when you look at these two different quarterbacks, I think one of Jimbo's biggest strengths is he's malleable as a head coach. He's not too stubborn or stuck in his ways. Do you think if Haynes King is the starter, we'll see maybe a little different offense than we'll see if Zach Calzada was the starter? Maybe a little more sprint out, maybe a little more moving the pocket, a little more quarterback run game. Do you think that's the way Jimbo's kind of preparing, or you think it's even across the board? We're going to play it the way we play it regardless.
100%. I think he will adapt to what he had. We saw it last year with injuries, right? He put the best players and the best ability to win for A&M. If that means moving Aniyah Smith to more of a playmaker role, if that means throwing the ball deep, I believe that is what Jimbo's done throughout his career. And with the talent that he has here, Billy, I think, you know what you can do with Zach in the pocket, but you also know if you have Haynes out there, you can do different things. And I think that's what makes Jimbo the type of coach that players want to play for, especially at the next level. He'll get you ready for that next level, but he's going to find a way to win with what he has.
And don't underestimate Daryl Dickey there as well. And you see what he did at Memphis. And I think he's the perfect OC for Jimbo, who calls the plays, does the game plan, coaches the quarterbacks. But Daryl Dickey is sitting there with a whole hell of a lot of respect from Jimbo. And Jim, I do think you've been able to see a little of his influence. But yeah, look at last year. They went from early before fall camp thinking they had two future NFL tight ends in Weidemeyer and Cup, and thinking after the bowl game that Aniyah Smith and Isaiah Spiller were going to be the 1-2 punch all year at running back. And then they go against Florida, and all of a sudden you uncover this deep threat that everybody said A&M didn't have the downfield passing game, and they beat Florida with it. Well, Caleb Chapman gets hurt. They have to, they lost Cup in fall camp, so that 2 tight end thing went out the window. Then they lose Chapman, Jake. And I remember talking to Jimbo after that game, and he sounded, it even made me go, man, that is tough, because Chase Lane had a big game against Florida in the slot. And now they had to move Chase to the outside, which he was better in the slot. Chapman was the best down the field deep threat. He was that big outside guy that they needed. They lost him. They got Chase moving out of position from a spot he was doing really well, which meant they had to move Aniyah back out to the slot, and they lost what they'd hoped was the combination in the backfield. So he adapted. They adapted with Kellen and ran him less this year because they could. And so, yeah, I do think they'll adjust accordingly, Jake, and I think that it'll be pretty fun to watch when you think about the running threats they're going to have.
And let me throw in this about Kellen. As much as I love Kellen, I do. Kellen was amazing. But it's funny how you look at what the pundits are saying about the A&M quarterback situation now. People can wait to replace Kellen when he was here. And now that he's gone, he is the greatest thing that ever happened. He was phenomenal. There's no doubt about that. But a lot of that, I believe, is the structure that Jimbo has in place.
Yeah, I agree. And, it's funny you bring up the tight ends, and I'm looking at it right now. And again, Cup that got hurt last year, we all know Weidermeyer's a first rounder. With Cup coming back, and I'll say this even before I get there, I don't think Damian Craig was appreciated enough for what he did with that wide receiver group last year and the injuries that they've had. I've talked to some Aggie fans who aren't super impressed with Damian Craig. I really don't understand that with the way those guys played last year with those injuries. But, Billy, back to you. Does A&M have the best tight end room in the country?
I'm not ready to say that, Jake, and here's why. The guy nobody talks about, the answer could be yes, because everyone knows Cup's 5-star background. The guy nobody talks about is Blake Smith, who was really impressive last summer coming out of South Lake Carroll. Quinn Ewers was his QB, even back then. But coming out of South Lake Carroll, he was really impressive as a tight end. He's not just the most imposing figure, but you get up on him and you realize, oh no, he's about almost 6'5", and he's big, and his catch radius is incredible. He doesn't drop a pass, and they say he really knew how to set up defenders and understood the route tree and coverage, and that comes from being there with Riley Dodge, the old A&M GA. Riley Dodge in that South Lake Carroll offense. So he was really impressive. And on the same day that Baylor Cup went down for the year, so did Blake Smith. They're both going to be coming back. So my answer is they can be. I think Jalen Weidemeyer can be the best tight end in college football. And I do think he'll be the best in the SEC. He was the second best last year behind Pitts. But I'm not ready to say yes, because neither one of those guys, they're both coming off injury, and neither one of them has played a snap of college football. So I'd say tap the brakes. The good news is I think they've got the best one maybe in college football in Weidemeyer. And then the even better news is there's two more that have a hell of a lot of talent.
Yeah, the 12 personnel is going to look pretty good for A&M. Shoot, you may even see him getting 13. And, Weidemeyer is a guy I think you can flex as well. He does bring that potential. He can go get the fade ball. He can box out and get the rebound per se. His catch radius is huge as well. David, flipping the script a little bit and looking defensively, and me and Billy have talked about this till we are blue in the face, that it's always fun to talk about offense, but A&M has really never had a problem scoring. It's really more of stopping people. Last year with Mike Elko, who I'll continue to say, I said it on your show Monday, I think is the most underrated coordinator in college football, and Aggie fans should feel blessed that they return him for another year. But this defense has a chance to be special again. Finished first in the SEC last year. I mean, you look up front. I'll let you, David, take it away on the defensive side and just talk about some superlatives. You look in the back end, there's some guys returning as well. Edger and Cooper had a big spring game at the linebacker position. How are you feeling about the Aggie defense heading into the season that is right around the corner?
Well, I mean, DeMarvin Leal, right? That's where it starts to me.
Monster.
Yeah. Monster. You're going to see him on Sundays. You're going to see him drafted very highly. The ability to get to the quarterback. He is just a beast out there. And to me, that's how you win at any level of football, is through that defensive line. If you're able to score some points, can you affect the offense you're playing against? And A&M absolutely can. And I've told Billy many times, I'm so excited to cover Leon O'Neal, because I believe he is one of those guys. Not only does he have the personality and the spirit that I love to help lead a defense, he plays with that swagger that I think a locker room can be galvanized by. What Elko is putting together there, plus the other pieces that are coming in. I don't know if they're going to be better than they were last year. They have the potential to be better than they were last year, Billy.
I think they absolutely should be better because of the growth of that secondary. And you mentioned Leon. There's Damani Richardson. There's Antonio Johnson, who I think is an emerging star as a nickel safety. And they return 9 out of 11 starters. They're going to miss Buddy Johnson. They're going to miss Bobby Brown. But 9 out of 11, and really like 20 out of 22. And that's the number that stands out. The other number that stands out to me a lot is 5. That's the number of super seniors on that defense. Yeah. Michael Clemens, Aaron Hansford, Miles Jones, Keldrick Carper as a backup, Jaden Peavy up front. We mentioned that D-line. Leal's leading the charge. McKinley Jackson was a 5-star signee.
It's a big win.
Who picked A&M over Bama, and at times looked better than Bobby Brown last year. And I think Bobby was better throughout the season, but at times McKinley, there were Saturdays where McKinley looked better and more disruptive and more of a problem to block. Jaden Peavy, I think he's an NFL defensive lineman, not a high-round pick, but he's an NFL D lineman that's played forever. It seems like Peavy and Clemens, you have 2 fit, super seniors on your D line. Tyree Johnson, the last time we saw him, he was collecting 2 sacks against North Carolina. He's back for his 3rd year of co-starting action. And again, you look at physicality and you go Leal, you go Clemens, you go Peavy, you go McKinley. And that doesn't even count, guys. Don't forget, they signed 2 5-star defensive linemen into Miche Adelier and Shamar Turner, who are already turning heads. Adelier was a midterm guy, so he's kind of got an extra step there for most true freshmen. And Turner, I was asking somebody yesterday about freshmen turning heads, and one of my team sources said Shamar is he's already just kind of at another level physically and athletically, where you feel like he's been in the program for 3 years already.
Yeah, well, I mean, the way Jimbo's recruited up front, it's the way he builds his program. He gets it. He got the blueprint from the best. I mean, he's been at multiple places and understand what wins in football. And look, we know spreading it around and all that stuff's great and it's fun and this, that, and the other, but you win and lose the game up front. For example, I'd rather have a damn good line and an okay secondary than a damn good secondary and an okay D line. It tends to work opposite of that. But, staying on the defensive side as we're winding down here with Billy Liucci and David Nuno of Texags, make sure and check them out. If you're an Aggies fan and you're not checking them out, like I said, I don't know what planet you've been on, but welcome to Earth and use your computer. But guys, when you look at the defensive side, schematically, do you think we'll see, because, we talk about offensive guys being malleable and understanding their personnel, but defense as well. With that experience, Billy, do you think we'll see A&M be a little more aggressive or maybe a little more exotic on the blitz front because they trust the guys in the back end? They trust the older guys up front to stay in their pass rush lanes and be able to force the ball where they think it's going to go? Or do you think it's going to be pretty similar to what we saw last year? Because if you're not evolving, you're dissolving.
I think it'll be pretty similar, but Mike Elko, I feel like it's always subtle with him.
Yeah.
Like the matchups he creates and what he does with his safety. And I think Elko, look, they've had an issue in the secondary that's gotten a little better each of the 3 years, but don't forget, in year one, they had guys that were struggling to cover Mississippi State's receivers with Nick Fitzgerald, the passer.
Right.
Which doesn't add up. That was like one of the only
oxymoron.
And so they would be in position and not make plays. Even a year ago against Oklahoma State in the bowl game, the Cowboys were exploiting matchups down the field because of the lack of speed. So the Aggies, again, they've upgraded, I think, significantly from year one to year two to year three. And I think it's going to be another significant upgrade. But Elko has had to and I don't think he gets near enough credit for masking and hiding things and kind of covering up for weaknesses. And I think as those weaknesses become less and less, like you said, Jake, it's going to allow him to, because he's having to cover less, he's going to be able to experiment and maybe, for lack of a better word, risk more.
Yeah.
And I do think, but I don't think it's going to be like a night and day type of thing. Because I do still think, if you look, even on the back end, O'Neal, Damani, they're not the fastest safeties. They're big, they're physical, they can run for their size, but they're not the fastest back there. Nor do I think Miles Jones is that either. And even Jalen Jones, they're not, you don't have those low 4.4 guys in the secondary. And so
smells like zone, Billy. Smells like zone.
It does, right? And against the Alabamas of the world, and there will be another team or two on the schedule that does, look at LSU, and depending on who their quarterback, I'm with you on Zach Johnson, by the way, all the way. I think they're making a big mistake if they don't make him the guy. I was kind of thinking that same thing as I watched A&M at Kyle Field last year with TJ Finley, and Johnson came in, and I go, yeah, I'm glad that guy didn't play the whole game. I mean,
For sure. David, I do got to ask you too, because, looking around and looking at A&M's schedule, give me just, one positive thought on it. Give me maybe a game or two or maybe a stretch where you think that's where A&M's really going to make their money.
I think first off, the October 9th matchup to me is the season, right?
Woo!
Yeah. You get that Alabama game. You got it at Kyle Field.
Mm-hmm.
Jimbo said a lot of great stuff in this offseason. They got people juiced up for that matchup. I think that if this is the year that A&M gets over the top, but then you got to finish the season strong too, right? Yeah, I think you have Ole Miss and LSU at the very end of the year. That is the swing to me that determines if you're going to that college football playoff or not. Regardless of what happens with Alabama, and I think the Aggies either win that game or are super competitive. It's not going to be the 28-point loss that we saw last year. If you take care of business the rest of the way and you can beat LSU again, which would be the third time in 4 years?
That would be 3 out of 4. That would be a trend.
That will show me that the tables have turned to A&M's favor. And I think that matchup, they got Prairie View in between the Ole Miss game, and then you got the LSU game.
You don't just let Prairie View walk in and get a dub at Kyle Field. I'm
well, sure they're the only threat to the Aggies in the battle for halftime, though. I will say that.
Hey,
A&M dominates halftime, but Prairie View is a real threat.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. I wouldn't be surprised to see Nick Cannon out there running the drum line or something halftime there at Kyle Field. But as we're winding down here, Billy, I couldn't let you go without asking some recruiting. A&M doing a hell of a job. Jimbo, it's become expected now, looking at another top 5-7 class. And again, once you get in that top 5 or 7, it's really splitting hairs outside of what Alabama's been able to do a couple times. But can you give our audience and Aggie fans maybe a couple guys to keep an eye on as we move through July and get into August here?
Yeah, it's tough because if you ask like kind of who's next, not many of these guys are on set dates right now. Yeah. I would continue to keep an eye on the Smoke Bowie and Bear Alexander. And again, Big Bear is supposed to announce, during those all-star games at the end of the season, but I would watch those guys. Bryce Anderson is down to A&M in Texas, a 5-star safety. He's hitting back-to-back their pool parties, barbecues, whatever they're calling them, respectively this summer. But Texas one day, A&M the next day. I mean, I don't know how many times a guy like Bryce is going to go back-to-back to see both schools before he can kind of say, okay, I think I know what I want. So I would keep a real close eye on him at the start of August. And you could flip a coin right now as to whether he'll be an Aggie or a Longhorn. So that's a big one. After that, I don't know that there's really Cam Dewberry, A&M Ohio State. If he decides to make a decision before the season, that would be a really significant win or loss for the Aggies, especially after Kelvin Banks going to Oregon. All of a sudden, it's like the spotlight is on Dewberry up front for the Ags. But I think those are probably the guys to keep the closest eye on right now. And there'll be a surprise or two along the way in August, because some of these guys are going to say, you know what, I want to focus on my senior season. I'm going to shut it down. But I would go right now with that group and perhaps a Jaden Scarlett, the defensive lineman who recently announced his top 3 of A&M, Oklahoma, and Missouri from Argyle High School up here in North Texas.
Yeah, and again, Jimbo's recruiting's been on fire. And we're getting toward that time of year, Billy, where the guys that want to decide before their senior season are going to decide, but the guys that want to hold all the way until after, as we get close to, I'm not calling it early signing day anymore. It's signing day. There's signing day, then there's late signing day. And David, last question here, and I'll let you guys go. I know you got to run. How has A&M handled NIL, and why is Haynes King not sponsored by Haynes right now so I can call him Captain Underpants for the whole year?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. We've talked a lot about it on the show, and I will tell you this: A&M has some big shakers, some movers and shakers, and you're going to hear a lot more about it in the future. And who knows? There's you got TV stations, you've got websites, everybody trying to get involved on this to try to get a handle of it's the Wild West, and we as a company ourselves, we're looking at it to see how things are shaking out. But a school like A&M, I think we've got every resource out there, every donor, you name it, that it's going to help, I think, keep us on the top tier of college football.
Yeah, I think they're just it's kind of not a wait and see mode, because I know what's going on behind the scenes, and there's a lot of activity. You just hadn't seen any of it make it, to the finish line yet. I think over the next week, 2 weeks, you're going to start hearing about certain deals for some of the high profile guys at A&M, kind of like you've seen with De'Aaron King at Miami and around the country. You'll start to hear a little more of these. I know a couple of these guys have representation. Weidemeyer's was public. I know there's 1 or 2 more with that. So you'll start to hear more of it. I just think it's everything's staggered right now. What fascinates me is we're about 3 weeks or so away from fall camp starting. How excited are these coaches going to be about those distractions going on during August? So it's like, I feel like there's a ton that's going to happen on the NIL front in the next 3 weeks or so, everywhere, not just in College Station, but I do expect you're going to hear a lot about A&M as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's been crazy, typically to get a hold of a kid or try and, do something like that in the past, you'd have to go through the SID and this, that, and the other. Now you can just reach out to the kid, something we've got planned here, which is wild. And I'm with you, Billy, as a guy that's been in it, keeping
Jake,
those guys focused is going to be tough.
And Jake, you've been on staff and been a coach, so you understand, we're in that too, because I have ideas and content and things like that, but it's like, you don't want to go and circumvent. We're just not
it's tough, man. It's tough,
circumvent
Billy.
a head coach and DM a player. And it's like, but the coach, they're not supposed to be direct, they're not directly involved in it, but it's like, you feel like saying, hey, this is what we plan? It's such a weird situation. Like, hey, this company locally, let's say, wants to pay this player this much, and that's 2 out of 85. And does the kid walk into the locker room one day and had signed a $20,000 deal and the head coach doesn't even know about it? The whole thing is very strange. And that's why, again, I think you're going to see it staggered, where things just kind of start happening. You go, oh, okay, we can do this. Let's do this. Or this company says, well, they did that, so we'll do that. Or Texas or Alabama or Auburn did this, so then I guess we'll do it too. You're going to see a lot of that all over the sport.
Yeah, well, to me, there's only a few head coaches, and Jimbo being one of them, actually, that has full control of the program. And, it's actually a great point. But, a guy like Nick Saban, I'd be shocked if anything went down, any sponsorship that he didn't know about. Kirby the same way. And honestly, still, Jimbo the same way too, because I don't believe you pay a guy $10 million a year and don't give him full control. And obviously it's paying off what they're doing, but it is going to be interesting to see it down the pipe. Billy Liucci, David Nuno, great stuff. It always is when I have you guys on. Tell everybody where they can find your content. It's great stuff. And man, I'm pumped about this season and excited to talk about the week 1 matchups here and to see you guys at SEC Media Day.
Well, TexAgs.com is the website. We've got it all. Be a subscriber and just sample us too. We're on YouTube now. We're kind of everywhere. And Billy, your Twitter handle?
At Billy Liucci, Liucci.
And I'm at David Nuno, Nuno.
Short and sweet. That's how I like it, guys. I really appreciate it. Let's do this again soon.
All right, Jake. Appreciate you, buddy.
Thanks, man.
All right, y'all be good. We appreciate y'all as well. Download us. Make sure you subscribe. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Go to the jboyshow.com. Grab some of that merch. It's hotter than Hansel at the Male Model Awards right now. Make sure you subscribe. Like I said, click that like button and make sure and review us on Apple Podcasts. Good reviews, hopefully. If it's a bad review, I appreciate your candor, but hopefully not too many of those. It's been another edition of the Jboy Show. And as we approach the season, we're gone.
The Jboy Show is produced by David Cohn, Technical Director Dave Hammock, Creative Director David Culbertson, Audio Engineer Feyzan Shareef, Production Assistants Blaine Crain and Kyle Orr, Executive Producers Jake Crain, Vince Thompson, Steve Chamberlain, and David Cohn. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit our website, thejboyshow.com, for updates regarding our newest apparel and merch designs. Win the water cooler with the Jboy Show.